Dr. Carrie Hepburn here from Compass PD. I am really excited because it's the beginning of the year, 2024, that is. We're in January, and Dr. Stephanie Brenner is joining me today. So, Stephanie, how are things going in your world right now?
Things are good. It's a hard to believe we're halfway, well, 3/4 of the way through January already. The first month is
Yeah.
almost over. And there are some fun things happening this year. And I think I've shared with you guys before, my oldest son is a senior. And so we have a lot of things that are lasts, and that's
Mhm.
really hard. It's a lot harder than you
Yes.
expect it to be. But then we also have some really cool firsts too. So right now, Kyle was invited to be part of the pit for the school musical. And that series of performances is coming up in a couple of weeks. And I'm just like super proud of him though, and excited for him because he's super proud and excited
Hmm.
about it. And he said it's kind of a big deal to be invited to be into the pit because it's you don't audition, you're asked to be a part of. So that's super cool. And then this year, already in January, 2024 brought me the fact that I am now the shortest person in my house.
Oh, yes.
So my youngest, sometime during Christmas break, bypassed me, and he's incredibly proud of it. I'm not.
Yes. It happens. It happens. And it's really important for like being another mom of sons as well. I remember that's like a big milestone for the youngest boy to not be the smallest anymore. It's like a competition thing. Who gets to be bigger? And they're
Yes.
happy when they at least pass mom.
Yes. And he just keeps walking up to me and he's like, I'm taller than you. Oh, look at
Yeah.
your eyes. And I'm like, I get it. Yes,
Uh,
you
yeah,
are taller than me. So
I
I'm
know.
happy for him, but not for me. It's
I
just it
You have
confirms
a
that
lot of big moments right now happening,
yeah.
with where your boys are in their ages, where there's like a lot of, like you said, lasts and firsts.
Yeah. It
I think
it's
as a mom, like nobody prepares you for your heart being ripped out of your chest when they, it's just like you feel like your heart's just being ripped out of your chest as they get that independence. And you're
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like in education, when you're a teacher and a parent, your job, you're successful in your job if you've made them independent and they can do the things without you. And that
It,
sucks.
it does. We're definitely experiencing that with my oldest because it's like he'll be 18 in a couple week or a couple months. And where's the balance of I don't get a say anymore?
I
Like
know.
that's hard to navigate. So if people have advice on that, I'm all in. I'm
We
all in.
are, we
Somebody,
appreciate parenting advice.
somebody should start a podcast on that.
That would be a great one. That would be a great one. I think people would listen to it.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited that you're here with us to share information to support coaches in January. We've been getting lots of really great feedback about how the podcast has been helping coaches. Many have mentioned that your podcast where you discussed difficult conversations, episode 32, was really helpful for them. And then the support, which is so timely right now, from episode 11, where you were talking about data and all of the data that was coming in and being able to analyze that. Those were really game changers in their thinking. So I'll make sure those are linked in our show notes today. And based on the feedback from the coaches, they state time and time again that they're continually asked to deliver professional development, support data conversations, and coach up administrators, and like horizontally coach their colleagues, like the teachers, without any professional learning themselves. Like they're asked to do this, but given no support no training on how to do that. And I think what's so exciting is that you've designed Empowering Coaches, a monthly journey to transforming minds and unlocking potential. It's an opportunity for coaches to meet with you and dig deeper into what we discuss on the podcast, and then have like that small group support from you.
Yeah.
What basically, like, how this goes is districts pay for Dr. Brenner to come to them and provide this kind of support for their coaches in person. But what we know is that not everyone can afford that. And what I know about Dr. Brenner is she has a heart for coaches and she really cares about them. She's always like, what are we going to do for the coaches? What are we going to do for the coaches? And so this Empowering Coaches monthly journey monthly coaching is $30 a month. So for $30 a month, you can have access to her brilliance. She wants to make sure that if your school district can't pay for it, that it's affordable for coaches. So check that out. That'll be linked in the show notes. It's affordable for districts, but it's also affordable for individuals as well.
Yeah.
So I think we can get started with the show. We'll get started
Yeah.
on what's happening in January. So
Yeah.
coaches right now have their first semester under their belts and they're preparing for January. What
Yeah.
should be on their radars as a coach?
Well, I when I was thinking about this, I'm like, oh goodness, two things immediately come to mind. While they're like a litany of things, but two things that come to mind right now. One is reviewing expectations and goals with
Mm,
teachers, and the second is data, which really
mm,
pairs well with what you were saying. One of the previous episodes that people really liked. So happy to say we'll dig into that a little bit more. Um, that first thing being reviewing expectations and goals. So, as a coach with staff, this can look a lot of different ways. It could be that you're reviewing expectations in a whole group at a staff meeting, or you're doing it with individual teams during their planning time or their PLC work time.
mhm,
How you're able to tailor that conversation and content will really depend on the setting. If you're needing to do it whole group with all of the staff, then you're not able to tailor it to one grade level as specifically. You're doing more
mhm,
whole broad type of things versus if you're in with one group of teachers, you can really hone in on a lot of different things that are important. What are some of the things that you might need to review? What I would suggest, the expectations that you could review at this time would be a lot of things related to curriculum and resource guidelines. We start getting in this like monotony of this is how things are going, and we're just like going and going and going, where and now we've had this time off and it's a good time to come back and bring out things like what are the minute expectations for all of your different content areas? What are the classroom structure expectations? Where do you find your scope and sequence or your curriculum? What is the assessment schedule? Just to put these things back on people's minds. It's
mhm.
not at this point of the year, not meant to be an in-depth discussion, because
Right.
assuming you did this type of thing at the beginning of the school year, this is
Mhm,
just a reminder of those things so that moving forward, they're knowing that that stuff is important and it helps ensure the year ends strong. It keeps the stuff that's really important at the forefront of their mind is a big deal. Maybe even correct some things that had gotten a little loose at the end of the previous semester time. We can shore things up. If you are some other data type of things that you might review with your staff could be any district building or team goals that were established at the beginning of the school year. That could be big initiatives that were new at the year. So it's a nice reminder time to teachers that it's why are we doing this? Why is this goal important? Why are we reviewing this data beyond someone telling you you had to? Why are we monitoring this information? Why are you working on this initiative, and so on? The biggest takeaway I have from that is this reviewing of things is that adult learners are learners, and
Mhm.
they really need to know why, like that big question, why. And we can't forget that they need to hear things multiple times, just like kids, before things are internalized enough to where there's a true understanding. And I think that's missed a lot.
Yes. I want to pause you for just a moment in this because really, these things that you're talking about, like reviewing these expectations, what you're doing for the coaches this year is helping them think through a system. These are the predictable things that happen throughout a school year. And so you're developing a system that is um, predictable
Right.
for the people that you're serving. And I think something that we'll see, and we've been doing tons of system work in districts, like helping them rebuild systems. It's been really hard for people to have, if they didn't have systems in place, develop them. But those that did have systems in place prior to COVID, they're really struggling getting back on those systems. Like, this is how school goes. If you don't have those like curriculum and resource guidelines, those expectations for minutes, the expectations for what class looks like for like the workshop model, or
Mhm.
what from bell to bell looks like in secondary, you want to have some of those expectations of what does instruction and student work look like, and that scope and sequence. Where are we, how are we doing on our pacing? Do we, in some places they don't have a scope and sequence. So thinking through that, and then that assessments, that it's just very visible. These are some of the systems. If you don't have that, maybe in your building as a coach, you're trying to build some of that so
Mhm.
that it does, make those expectations visible. So we prefer it coming from the district level, and then the coach is supporting that. But what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Brenner, are like you're helping them create their system of how school goes again and again.
Right. And that it's also too, the classroom teachers should be doing those same things with their kids now that they're
Yeah.
back too. So they come back from an extended break. It's what are the routines of our classroom? Don't forget, I
Mhm.
want you to do this, and you put these things here. This is how you turn in your work, and this is how conversation looks in our classroom. So they're resetting those kinds of things in their classroom. So as the
Yeah.
coach, we need to reset those same kinds of things with our staff to everyone's
Mhm.
back on the same page. We're back to being really tight in our expectations and our instruction so that we can end the year really strong.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So I mentioned two things. You could review expectations and goals. And the second thing is data.
Yeah.
What I have found is this time of the year is a lot like the beginning of the school year, where coaches and teachers are overwhelmed with data
Mhm.
because universal screening data has been updated around this time. Curriculum assessments are being done, like if it might be like a standard based assessment or a benchmark or end of the unit assessments. Report card type of assessments are happening, progress monitoring data, goal updating, all of this stuff like classroom visits, all those things are coming to a point. And so we have our beginning of the year, now we have our mid-year data. And I think that tip or strategy I would offer as for coaches is like, where do you start? I guess is the question.
Mhm.
And what I like to think about is what is the thing that you're going to share with teachers. So determine what data you have to share with teachers and then think about how can you make it most meaningful to their everyday life and their everyday teaching. For example,
Mhm.
if I have to share updated universal screening data, what I really want to do is talk about the numbers and any changes that they see. But I need them to know exactly which students the data represents. That might look like some kind of sorting where teachers can quickly see who, based on the current data, where are students falling. So who's meeting benchmark, who's not meeting benchmark. But within that, have a way of noticing which students changed. So this kid is now meeting, this group of kids that are meeting benchmark, this group of kids are not meeting benchmark. Within the
Mhm.
group of kids who are meeting benchmarks, these particular kids made more growth than we expected. These particular kids did not make the growth that we expected for each category of meeting or not meeting the data.
Yep.
That's a Having that done ahead of time is really important, because what I have found is that it's most successful when you share data like that, so that you can start thinking about how can you take the time. I'm going to step back. I want the student data, the numbers things sorted already ahead of time, so that in the meeting I can plan for, and as a coach, I can take the time to explain what each part of an assessment or the data tool that I'm looking at, what that is actually measuring. So
Mhm.
as the coach, I'm thinking about, I need to share the numbers, but then I'm also thinking I need to give the teachers background on this assessment. So questions that you can answer might be like, what is this particular assessment looking at? It might be a standard or a skill. Um, what are the expectations for that part or that assessment? So it's like kids should be able to fill in the blank. Um, Another question is, why is knowing this information, or why is this being assessed important? So we
Mhm.
want kids to be able to do this so that they can fill in the blank. I think like the fourth question would be, what do you see most often in students who do well on this assessment, and what do you see most often in students who do not do well? So you're thinking of what behaviors or strategies can you notice of students while they're doing this assessment? Kids who do well, kids who are
Mhm.
not doing well. Taking that a step further, get teachers to start thinking about what do they see in their whole group and small group instruction. So in the kids who are doing well, what behaviors and strategies and evidence in their work are you going to see? Kids in who are not doing well, what behaviors and strategies are you going to see in their work in whole group and small group instruction? And then finally, as the coach, I am trying to answer this, like the most important thing. What do I, as the teacher, need to do or can I do in my everyday instruction to help students not performing well and to push those students who are doing well? So I know the kids, but I need to get to the conversation that helps them know the things they can do to push kids further. This is
Mhm.
the part that's missed most often in a data
Mhm.
conversation.
Mhm. Well, um, as you're talking, the best data conversations are when it's set up and ready for teachers. We're seeing more than ever that our teachers are pulled in a bazillion directions and they don't have time to do this. So we're telling them to do it, right? Like leadership's like, "Oh, we're doing PLCs and you should be doing
Look at
all of these
this.
things." Yeah, like, but the reality is it's not possible. Like, it's not
Right.
possible for them to do the kind of work that you're saying as a coach, we could do this work and really have meaningful discussions and impact instruction. Without it, these meaningful discussions and instructions not being impacted, right?
Correct. Right. And so, like, as the coach, how I plan to structure that time with teachers is going to make it go well or not. So, the
Hmm.
planning you do on the front end of it is really
Hmm.
important. And that's why I started with having a protocol or a system that you use that you can quickly identify which kids we're talking about, and just giving that to kids ahead of our teachers ahead of time
Hmm.
helps you get the conversation moving, because then they're not like trying to click in and find this, go do this, log in
Right,
here, so they can see what kids we're talking about. Just give that
right.
to them ahead of time. Then if you're thinking in the meeting or as the coach, the process I'm going through is like, okay, I'm going to identify my kids, and then I need to start during this time. I want to answer those questions for teachers. Like, what is this assessment
Hmm.
looking at? What are the expectations for this? Why is knowing this important? What do you see most often in kids? What might you see during small group and whole group? And then, okay, what am I going to do for them every day in class? Because that's
Right,
the meaty part. But you have to have like a structure for the meeting or a protocol for the meeting that
right.
lets you get there. One of the things that helps me be most successful in those conversations is that I set a timer. Like, we're
Hmm.
gonna spend 4 minutes identifying the kids. I have these 4 or 5 things that I want to kind of like throw at you. It's, what is this assessment looking for? What are the expectations? Why do we need to know
Hmm.
this? I got 4 minutes. I'm going to go give you all of that. Then get into
Yes,
the strategies of,
yes.
these are the behaviors I'm gonna see, and this is how I know if they're doing well or not. I'm gonna see this in small group and whole group, and now this is what I'm gonna do. So, but, and then I structured that part of the time for, like 15 minutes, because that's the meat
Hmm.
that I want us to have. So, and sticking to that time. It helps
Yep,
teachers know too, we're not gonna get bogged down in this other part that
right,
doesn't help us get to this part.
right. And I think coaches need to have right now on their radar that that takes a lot of time to
And
go
prep.
through that data, get the data and prep. And so it's really important that they communicate with that with their administrator, the
Yeah.
teachers that they support, that they need and deserve the time to be able to gather this so we can have successful PLC time with teachers or successful meetings and impact that instruction. So
Right.
that's another thing that's like coming out to me like,
Yeah. And that's a really predictable problem, Carrie. I mean,
yeah,
not having the communication of, this is the data. I have a time frame of when we need to look at the data so that it is immediate and
yes,
useful, because that data, it's outdated. And so you don't want to make instructional decisions about data that's too old. So
yes,
you need a real, you and your the coach and administrator and teacher leaders, like, need to have good communication about, when is this happening, whose role is to get this done, and like,
hmm,
it has to flow really well. So
yeah,
that, but that's something you need to, if you don't have it established already, these are things you can think about starting to establish, so that
yes,
eventually you do have them established.
love it. What
Yeah.
are some predictable problems they're going to face right now?
The one that we just mentioned is the time commitment that it takes to get all that data going, and the coordination, making sure everyone knows their role, the expectation, and communicating this is happening when this is happening is one. The other thing that I think is a huge struggle for a lot of schools that we service is,
Right.
there is a huge disruption to schedules due to weather. Like right now, my kids have a snow day today, and other holidays. And it's really predictable.
Hmm.
Because of it, it's hard to get into a flow of the day and the weeks, it just feels like things are really choppy. When
Mhm.
you're here for a day, you're not here for a day, and then you're out for a holiday or a weekend or extended weekend. It just is hard to keep track of where you are. Having
Yes.
a really clear scope and sequence from your curriculum,
Yeah. Yep.
knowing really s- having a really clear understanding of what are the overall big ideas and objectives of your curriculum and the units can be
Yep.
incredibly helpful when you have to make decisions. Because at some point, it's
Right.
like third quarter is at an end, or this some trimester's at an end, and I got to get done, or else nothing. I'm
Mhm.
not going to meet my end of the thing. So I had really hard decisions that I need to make as a coach, spending time visiting any of those proficiency scales or rubrics, progressions, and continuums that are related to assessments and unpacked standards will be really
Mhm.
impactful and helpful for teams as they're making those decisions about I, a lesson's got to go. And how
Right.
do we decide what lesson's going to go? That's how I rely on my unpacked standards and my continuums and my proficiency scales and rubrics, because that's the big ideas of the unit.
Right.
And I need to make sure I'm meeting the big idea.
Right.
I think this time of year, it's just with that is that you have to maintain the focus and keep this sense of urgency going, because the winter is just like blah. And it kind of
Yes.
just feels like it's monotony and there are winter blues. And it just feels like you have this false sense of plenty of time. But all of a sudden, we're done. It's going to be March before we know it. And you didn't get as far as you needed to get because
Right.
the choppiness of the schedule was like really misleading.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. Those winter can kind of like slow things down, which it naturally does with the we want to stay inside and we're wrapped
Right.
up in warm things and all of that. So we do have to keep that sense of urgency because we can make significant growth in the
Yeah.
next several months. Like a lot can happen if
Yeah.
we don't take our foot off the gas.
Yes.
Keep that.
Exactly.
What tip or reminder would you like to share with coaches?
Um, Before you know it, the end of the year is going to be here. And you're not going to really know how you got here. So I think
Mhm,
that starting in January and February to outline plans for end of the year procedures and systems that you know are going to be coming up, especially if there are new things you want to accomplish.
mhm,
Now is the time to get feedback and input from classroom teachers, administrators, specialists in the building, so you can make a very strategic plan and it doesn't happen haphazard in a rush all at one time because you forgot about it and it's
mhm.
April and we didn't realize.
Yes.
As crazy as it seems, we're at the time where you need to start making the plans for end of the year procedures and
Mhm.
systems. That's my tip
Well,
for
and
this.
that's interesting. I recently recorded the podcast for curriculum, professional learning,
Oh,
assessment,
yeah.
instruction leaders. And in there, I was telling them the work that you're doing now is really setting you up for next year. You know, the work that you're doing is setting the tone for, you're kind of giving them glimpses into, like for you guys, you're giving them glimpses into what the end of the year's like and what
Right.
predictions of or foreshadowing what's going to happen next year. So that work is important to start now so that it's not a surprise and things haven't just been changed or you're prepared. Just the feeling of things not being rushed and intentional and prepared helps create that safe space for our teachers and our students.
I agree. And what I would add is that it is when we don't rush, we don't wait till the last minute, we're able to get feedback and input from a lot of stakeholders in the building. And
Mhm.
that helps the process of making something go well. When you
Yes.
get the perspective of a lot of people, it helps everyone feel like they had a role in the decision making, and it wasn't some things aren't
Mhm.
done to them. Things are done with them and
With them.
for a very specific purpose that they had input in. We're not able to do that if we wait till the last minute.
Yes. Yes. It's not, and people can tell.
Yeah.
I mean, those that we serve can tell when we aren't, when we're rushing through, and
Yes.
it's not as, as detailed or as thought through as it should be, honestly. Well, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance with
I love
us
being here with you.
today. I love having you here. It's always so much fun. Compass PD community, we are asking you to help us reach our goal of impacting education by reaching the learning of 1 million students during the 23-24 school year. You can do that by liking and subscribing to our podcast, sharing it with a fellow educator, and giving us a review. So we would love for you to do that. If you have something you want us to talk about, let us know. We are here to serve. That's really our mission, is serving educators. We want to just tell you to take care and stay inspired, Compass PD community, and have a great day.